Turf Talk with Drew Miller.
On this week's episode of Tiger Turf Talk, we host PhD candidate Miss Devon Carroll of Tennesse Turfgrass. What an incredible episode with such an incredible person. We dive into her most recent study on women in turf and really just discuss how she went about taking the qualitative data that really dives into the journey and the experience that each of the women have in this industry and how we've sort of seen how far we've come. And again, seeing this transition to, again, more women in the industry and really taking a leadership role in their spaces, both in golf and sports turf. It has truly been awesome to be able to talk to her. She is actually defending her thesis in the spring. We are so excited for her, and we really are hoping for the best. We know she's going to do an awesome job, and we really can't thank you enough, Devin, for taking the time and truly for sharing your inspiration for everyone in our program and for everyone across the country in our industries. Again, best of luck, and we know you're going to kill it this spring when it comes to your defense. So we hope you enjoy this episode of Tiger Turf Talk. Good afternoon and welcome to the 65th episode of Tiger Turf Talk. I'm your host, Drew Miller. Today we have on an incredible guest. We have a doctoral candidate from Tennesse Turfgrass. We have Devin Carroll. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time. I reached out right sort of after your recent research was released on women in turfgrass, and I kind of want to just sort of dive into it. It truly was incredible, and I've talked to you a little bit about it and sort of what I've been working with my thesis. What has it been like for you to sort of approach this? How did it come to, again, sort of fruition of creating the discussions, having that qualitative data, and really getting to know sort of some incredible people in our industry? And how do you sort of see that having a critical impact in the future?
Yeah, I think it's been really transformative for me personally, and just given, people like you reading the paper and then reaching out about it, I think it's definitely already had an impact on the industry, and hopefully, we'll see a lot more of that as it continues. But just as far as kind of how it came to be, I took a women in leadership course as an elective, and Dr. Carrie Stevens was teaching the class, and she does work on women in agriculture. And she was talking about how they were studying, that there were very few women in ag as a whole and what they could do to get more women into the industry. And I'm sitting there looking at the numbers in her paper like, oh my gosh, turf is even way below agriculture. So I approached her and said, can we do a similar study in turfgrass? And she was immediately like, yeah, this is a group that needs to be studied. So let's do it. And it's really great. I got to interact with 13 female leaders in the turf industry and, get to know them, get to know their stories, and then try to tell their stories in a way that's, meaningful to the rest of the industry.
Absolutely. And again, with that, I mean, being able to do things like this, again, hearing your story, hopefully later on here in the podcast, but being able to, again, read sort of coherently among all areas, and we'll get into that here in a second, but something that, again, the research really spoke to was the thing I'm working with my dissertation is school culture, and working with a specific high school. What is it like for you, again, to sort of see the culture when it comes to the females in the industry? And again, how it's sort of on the rise, the third female head groundskeeper in minor league baseball was just hired this 3 weeks ago. And again, it's very small and a very small portion, obviously, of what the industry is, but it's growing. I mean, when you look at it as an exponential rate for what it was 5 years ago, what was it like for you to sort of study the culture aspect of what our industry is, and how do you sort of see the outlook of the culture of the turf industry moving forward after, again, your research with so many incredible people?
I think your focus on culture here is really important because culture is what we all need to understand to foster change, right? You can't make a change happen if you don't really understand kind of the root of where we're at. So I totally agree. I wish we had formal numbers on, the amount of women in turf 5-10 years ago, but I started, 8 years ago now. And I can tell you that even in 8 years, there are more women. We're slowly on the rise. So I think the culture, if you will, has a long way to go, but I've definitely seen some changes, and it's really become a movement now, this whole women in turf, conversation. We're having conferences about it. We're having these sorts of podcasts. So you can tell that there is change, and, the culture is becoming more welcoming and receptive, to diversity.
Absolutely. And again, I can't say it enough for my kids. I always am way more trustworthy with the females that are taking my class because they're more meticulous and they actually pay attention instead of just trying to run things over and have fun with the equipment. They want to learn. So again, with that sort of being, again, sort of everything that you discuss in your study, when it comes to the actual like sort of outlook of how they felt in the industry, again, it's sort of a sad way, again, to ever have anybody look at it like that and be faced with, again, sort of a stereotype. What was it like for you to, again, discuss those stereotypes with them and sort of get the feedback on how they've experienced it and how they've hopefully seen a positive change? And again, it goes right back to that culture we were just talking about. What was it like for you, and sort of how have you seen the stereotypes been sort of having an impact on, again, that movement of women in the industry?
Yeah, it was hard to listen to some of these interviews. I mean, I went through some of the similar situations, of course, working in academia. It's not the same as the girls who are out on the field and out on the course. But for them, one of the hardest things was really feeling like, they weren't given a chance in a lot of situations. People assuming that they physically couldn't do the job, or, just acting like, you don't belong at this conference. You don't deserve to win this award. So just feeling like they weren't given the same opportunities as their male counterpart. And so I give all the ladies a lot of credit. I mean, they're really strong women who try not to let that bother them and just push through. And I mean, they're killing it. They're leaders in the turf industry. You just said, we just picked up a third one in minor league baseball, and there's 2 in the MLB already. So they're creating their own way. And I think the paper really highlighted what the industry can do to support women, but also some things that women can kind of do on their own and internally to improve their situation.
Absolutely. And it's great to hear, again, sort of, again, that motivation behind it to, again, further their own career and understand that it's on them to, again, be the face of our industry in years to come. What was it about the research that you enjoyed most? Being able to talk to all these people. There are so many different things that you hear, and obviously you had multiple researchers on the project. What was your favorite part about it, and sort of what outcome were you really pleasantly surprised to see?
Sure. So from a personal perspective, it was just getting to know these 13 women on a deeper level. Some of them I had known a little bit from conferences and whatnot, but I really feel like my own support network has grown because we've had these deep discussions about problems. And now I feel like, these are people I can definitely approach and rely on. And some of them I'm going to be, friends with for a long time. But as far as what the research found, I think we really discovered some important information for recruitment. Just for example, I think it's 12 of the 13 ladies, did not start in turfgrass as a career right out of high school. And so, that might not seem like a big deal, but when you sit down and look at the numbers, what that's telling us is that, what you're doing is important. We need to reach people before they're making that out of the gate decision in college. So we learned some really interesting things by, really taking the time to interview these ladies thoroughly and hear about their journeys as a whole, both the negatives and the positives.
And that's a perfect segue into sort of my next question. With that, I mean, we are seeing such a increase in awareness, and it's not just turfgrass managers that are noticing. There are organizations making, again, their deductive knowledge reasons that the fact that the turfgrass manager is necessary and needed, whether it's the fight against artificial turf versus natural grass, everything that goes into having an issue with what we do. There is a knowledge that we need to find that next generation of turfgrass manager, because there are going to be so many opportunities. I mean, golf with the pandemic boomed, there are so many different opportunities and everything. With sports turf, we're starting to see, I mean, the national championship game, that injury brought a lot of awareness to what's going on because no one was near them. And obviously with artificial turf, you're going to have those issues. So players are pushing for natural grass. And then again, what do you sort of see being, through your research, that way of bringing in that younger generation, in discussing with them? Like, again, we've heard so many different stories about how they joined the industry, whether it was from they ran into it by accident. They looked it up on a computer one day because it was like, hey, what can I do with my life? What was it like for you seeing all that? And even your own personal experience outside of the research, what do you think would be that next sort of step of bringing those younger generations into the industry?
So you hit on it perfectly, at least in my opinion so far. It does seem like there's a little bit more opportunity in golf. The GCSAA is working on the first green program. They're expanding into FFA education, which I think is, really going to be huge for us. I would love to see Sports Turf start building some of these sorts of involvement programs. And we're also finding that, mentorship or just talking about the industry is big. Some of the ladies up in Canada have been donating their time, really. They are going to high schools, reaching out to guidance counselors and saying, hey, can I come in and just give a talk on what I do? And then 3 or 4 students at the end come up and say, hey, this was awesome. And they invite them to come out and shadow them for a day at the golf course. And they always try to make it fun, pet the golf course dog, ride around in the cart. But I just think that's really important. A lot of students just don't know that turf's a choice. And especially in sports turf, I mean, you've got how many students playing sports? They clearly like being outside, being in that environment. We just need to find innovative ways to get it in front of them that, well, this can be your job to, wear shorts and be at a baseball stadium for your whole life.
You just gave my entire speech for STMA, the presentation me and my kid. It was just what you stated, that was perfect. I mean, I think that is the biggest untapped area of, again, the next generation. How many kids are in love with the sport that they're never going to go to the next level and play,
Right.
How do I stay in that? And that's what I did. I was a failed college baseball player and I was like, I want to stay in it. I obviously have sports management could be an option. But with that, you go into ticket sales and you got to work your way up. And it's just it's the people that
I think that also helps us get people who really care, right? If you were a baseball player and now you're managing a field, the intricacies of, hey, the mound needs to be like this. And you probably care a lot about how the field looks because you want your team to be proud of it. And I just think that helps us pick up people who are really invested, which I think helps the industry as a whole,
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that. And that's the biggest thing is the passion part about it. Everybody always talks about how, again, work-life balance has always been an issue for our industry and having that ability to shut off, you know what I mean? But if you have people who are passionate about it and hopefully people in a higher up position start understanding the need for the work-life balance, you'll have people that want to be there, and have the time to give a little bit more if they need to, but it take away when they, again, need to be with family or something like that. And it's all about passion, and that's something that I always focus on with my kids is just having them be passionate about what we do. And again, 98% of my kids are not going to go into turf. I have over 200 students, so it's not like we're going to have 190 kids do it, 10 kids in a class, that's amazing. It's a great number to have.
That's huge.
And just being able to have the kids have a passion for it that are not going to do it. But then later on, when they're talking to people, I did this class when I was in high school. They do sports turf or they do golf, advocating for what we do. That leads to even more. And then again, we just have this big branch of, again, knowledge going out for our industry, So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on all of that. Something else, and it's sort of back to your research, sorry, but something that I really appreciated about it was that with the qualitative data you were taking, you were focusing on the journey and the experiences they were having, which I think is such an important part of what we do as a turf manager, not just looking at, again, when it comes to academia, we're looking at the quantitative data and helping us be better turf managers. What was it about this study that, again, you sort of had a different approach and how you enjoyed it in comparison to some of your other stuff that you've done with quantitative data and focusing on a product maybe or different things like that?
Yeah, so I'm training quantitative data, which for the listeners who might not know, basically means numbers. Okay, so you're collecting numbers and you end up analyzing them statistically, whereas qualitative is more kind of social science gears. So yeah, I was meeting with, Dr. Stevens to talk about, well, how are we going to do this? And we talked about maybe doing a survey, which can kind of go either way because it's technically numerical, but you're asking more personal questions. And she just said, I really think to uncover the important information, you need to get as close to these women as possible. And so unfortunately, we actually had funding. I was supposed to fly to all 13 women, meet them at their course to just really get a good look at what their day is like. But due to COVID-19, we did have to move that to Zoom. But, the meetings were anywhere from a half hour to an hour and a half. So we really just got a deep, rich look at their experiences, the good and the bad. And you talked about how it was, the journey and the experience. I didn't want to just come flat out and say, hey, what are the bad things in turf that we need to fix? I wanted to get a global perspective of what got you here, what's been working, what's not been working, so that we can get a better look at where to go.
Yeah, I love it. You're like, I don't want to just be like, what sucks, guys? Tell me. I need to know. So something that I'm very interested to hear is about your sort of journey. I don't know if you ever remembered the Virginia Tech team, but you guys always kicked our ass, and it was always your team that would win CMA. And we would all be like, well, she kicked our ass again. Here we go. Here, another year,
Penn State does take Turf Bowl very seriously.
Very seriously. I feel guilty because we came in third my last year, and I was like, we did not try as hard as these guys. But with everything, what brought you to Turfgrass, and what brought you to, again, one of the best universities when it comes to turfgrass management? And how did you sort of find out, with everything you researched, what was it for you,
Yeah, so I am really lucky in my turfgrass journey for two reasons. The first of which is how I got into it. So I played golf in high school. I just love being on the golf course outside. It's great. But my cousin is a golf course superintendent. So that's how I'm one of kind of the oddballs who got into turf, straight out of high school. I was fortunate to have a direct connection with someone. I always heard about his job, how much he enjoyed it. And I figured, hey, I love the golf course. He loves his job. Sounds like a good fit. And so the second reason that I think I'm really lucky is that, I'm from Pennsylvania. So naturally, I went to Penn State for turf school. I didn't even look anywhere else. I mean, that was the closest spot. I got in-state tuition. And then almost after the fact, realized, wow, this is one of the premier turf schools in the world. So there wasn't a lot of thought for me about going to Penn State. In hindsight, I got really lucky on that front. But Penn State was a fantastic school, and now I'm at the University of Tennesse, and I think both of them are just top tier institutions, and would really encourage any students who are listening, consider both of those programs for sure.
Absolutely. So we actually recorded a podcast. It's not going to be released until after the general session. So Dr. Sorokin and I had a podcast a couple weeks last week, but we all that are on that panel for it, we actually did it before we're going to present it. So it's going to come out later. But again, I've been talking to him. We have a kid who's looking to go to Tennesse, and it's crazy to me. When we went up to Penn State, Dr. Kaminsky had us up 3 years. It's 3 years now. It's freaking COVID, man. Sorry. But I went to Virginia Tech, and I love Dr. Goley and everything that I had there. But when I was there, I was just blown away by like the research facility, everything with the connections, having the minor league ballpark there, Beaver Stadium, everything in between, right there on campus by where you did your research and everything with everyone. What would you say, again, sort of end your time at Penn State? Obviously, you were talking about how golf course superintendent was sort of the plan. What was it that brought you to sort of, again, the research and the academia and furthering your education to, again, where you're a PhD student now at Tennesse?
Yeah, it was a wild ride. When I started my undergrad, I mean, even though it was people with PhDs teaching me, I just never put two and two together that, you could go to grad school for this. So yeah, I fully intended to be a golf course superintendent until my second year of school. I was getting pretty good grades, and a couple of professors pulled me aside and said, look, I mean, you really seem like an academic student. You should think about higher level education. And so Dr. Kaminsky really took me under his wing. He just met with me and laid out like, look, this is the parameters of grad school. We're really fortunate in the turf industry that students are typically on assistantship, which means your education is paid for, and they actually give you a stipend to cover your living costs while you're studying in exchange for you doing 20 hours a week of work for the university. So once I heard that, I was pretty sold, like, hey, I can get a free master's degree in something I really love. And he brought me on as an undergrad researcher in his lab, helped me win a grant to do my own undergrad research project. he sent me out to the Crop Science Society to give a talk on my work. And I was just hooked after that. Taking a project from start to finish and sharing the results was just really rewarding in a different way than, what I thought it would be like to be a superintendent.
Yeah, Dr. Kaminsky is a great guy. He reached out and set everything up for us, and that's great that you had the opportunity to work with him. What was it that, again, with everything, wanted you to go past, again, sort of your master's, being able to take on the next step, and moving to a different location? It's something that, again, a lot of people, when they're working in the industry, are like, well, is this an opportunity that I want to take? Do I want to move across the country and work at this site? What was it for you that Tennesse sort of brought you in, and that was somewhere where you really wanted to focus on your PhD work, in contrast to, again, Penn State being the amazing school it is?
Well, first of all, I hate snow. So for me, it was really easy.
There you go. That's a good answer.
But as far as going to Tennesse, one of the drivers in me going to a Southern school was I did have so much experience working with cool season grass at Penn State. I just really thought it was important, if I was going to get a PhD and I was going to work for one of these national companies someday, I need familiarity with warm season turf grasses, warm season weeds, diseases, etc. And so I was really fortunate. I work for Dr. Brosnan now. He is just a fantastic, well-connected weed scientist. And when he mentioned that he had funding that fit my time frame, it was just, game over. And it's nice for me too. Tennessee is only about 10 hours from home. So it's in the South, but it's not crazy far away. So yeah, the stars just aligned. Everything there was perfect for me to say yes to it.
Love how you said 10 hours. This is like a short period of time.
Well, Texas A&M is like 30, so
that is true. That is true. I'll give you that. 10 hours is somewhat manageable. I wouldn't be driving it too often, no. So with everything, again, research is such a big part of what our industry is, and we're coming up on the time frame where the research really becomes prevalent at these conferences with GIS and STMA and all these different groups. What other research have you done that you really think has had an impact, again, on how we are as turfgrass managers, whether it's practices, maybe it's a chemical that you studied that had a big, again, sort of push towards, again, being a major game changer in our industry?
So there's two studies that really stick out to me. The first is one I did that was looking at phrase mowing as a means of weed control, so especially in sports, you guys typically are using it, to prep a field, to do some leveling, remove thatch, whatnot. But we found that, when you're removing that thatch and soil surface, you're actually removing weed seed with it. And so this was cool from a couple perspectives. First of all, you touched on this earlier with public perception. There's really a push to move away from using, synthetic chemicals, which are an important part of the toolbox. But when it comes to integrated pest management, we need to be researching other strategies. So that was really cool. But the most interesting part was, now that I'm kind of on this qualitative data train, so I did the research and found, yes, phrase mowing is effective in controlling annual bluegrass. But then I paired it with a qualitative study, and I interviewed 8 turfgrass managers about their experiences phrase mowing. Because what I've come to realize is sometimes as scientists, we come up with something that works, but we don't really understand how someone can put that into practice. And so what I learned from those guys, they were using it in innovative ways I hadn't thought of. And they also shared, that there's some challenges to them actually being able to implement phrase mowing. And so that was a cool study. And I really hope in the future that more scientists doing quantitative work take the time to include that, qualitative aspect of things.
Absolutely. And that just adds a whole new component to, again, understanding where your quantitative stuff comes from. It's just great to hear, a lot of people don't really think about that. They're more about, hey, we got it done. Let's get it done, not let's get the story behind what this says, which is awesome. What has been some of your favorite work? Being able to, again, add qualitative to your quantitative studies is really cool. And some of the people, maybe what have been some of the cool people that you've met and be able to talk to about when it comes to your work and what you've seen through your research?
Yeah. So I guess my favorite project is my dissertation. I'm a little bit biased. But we're really redefining the biology of Poa annua. Despite its name, annual bluegrass, my research really points to the fact that it's a perennial. So just like Kentucky bluegrass or tall fescue, it's a perennial species that sometimes the environment causes it to die. And so this has been cool work because it's had, major implications as far as management. But I have met some awesome people. You might have heard of Dr. Joe Vargas up at Michigan State. He is just a pillar of the turfgrass community up there. And this is something he's worked on. So, I went up there and played around a golf with him, and we just kind of talked shop about how do we go forward communicating this, and, been invited to speak on that topic at a lot of different conferences and share the work. So it's important work, and it's really expanded my network, and I'm excited to have those connections, in the future.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's really great about research and about the industry as a whole. Everyone's always trying to help each other, and that starts with the research that's then benefiting, again, the sports turf or the golf course managers. Being able to have that connection and be able to work alongside other professionals is great to hear, especially, again, being in such a distant place, being Michigan to Tennessee and stuff. With that, sorry, my dog's going a little crazy. But with everything, what are your future aspirations, when it comes to, again, you mentioned a large company or something along the lines like that. What is your hopes for the future? Again, you're working on your dissertation. God bless you, because I can't stand mine right now. I have to defend here in a couple of weeks, and I'm not happy about it. But what are your hopes for the future when it comes to your career?
Yeah, so right now I am leaning more toward an industry position than staying in academia. And what I mean by industry is working probably for one of the pesticide companies, working ideally in, pesticide development or research to bring, new chemical tools to the market. But I'm still really passionate about, students and women in research. So I fully intend to keep doing some projects on the side and stay involved with all the women in turf stuff moving forward.
Absolutely. We actually had, I think it's Dr. Munshaw on, and I mean, he had, I don't even know how many years in academia. Now he's with Mountain UC. It's really interesting to see, again, sort of the difference between those things. And obviously you've been a part of it for so long through your research and, again, getting your doctorate and everything. It's definitely really cool to see, especially because that's where you guys are really needed, in order to have that major impact on what we're doing and how we move forward. Especially POA. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing you could ever do. If you ever find the cure, you would be a billionaire. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's number one most troublesome weed in turf, and actually second most troublesome weed in all grass crops. So
really?
Fun fact of the day.
There we go.
Problematic for more than turf.
Write it down, people. Learn every day, with everything, again, being a part of our industry in so many different ways, what is it that you've sort of seen when it comes to students that you've worked with in, again, your role as a student yourself, whether that's teaching classes, whether that's just being a part of undergraduate research? What has it been like for you to sort of be a mentor in that space? And again, being able to research women in turf, and again, advocating for, again, such a great cause for what the future of our industry has. What has that been like for you? And how has that sort of impacted how you go about doing things in your work?
Yeah, it's been really rewarding. I mean, as much as I love science and doing the research and pushing out the publications, I'll say, the highlights of my career have been TAing classes. I was the turf bowl coach at Tennesse. There's a master's student in my lab. He was an undergrad when he started. And so I've been a little bit of a mentor for him, kind of shepherding him through those roles. And he gave his first, scientific talk at the crop science meeting back in Utah. And it was like that proud mom moment of, look at him. I mean, he's killing it. And I'm just happy that I got to be there for it and help him out a little bit. So that's been really exciting. And I will say, for me choosing probably an industry over academic route, that was a tough choice because I do really love the people connection. But, like I said, I'm going to do whatever I can, no matter what my job is, to stay connected and, continue mentoring students and fostering change in the industry.
And again, I mean, whoever grabs you, as lucky as they will be, obviously they'll want you to continue that. Hopefully. I mean, that would be pretty much a great brand deal for them, in the sense of adding more to the brand. I shouldn't say brand deal. That was terrible. I'm sorry. But being, again, an advocate for something that's such a critical part, again, moving forward in our industry. So again, I'm sure they'll be excited to do whatever it is you want to do with when it comes to outside of their work, um, with everything we just sort of talked about, again, you seeing, again, your graduate student who's now, again, moving forward just like you, uh, who were those mentors for you? You talked about Dr. Kaminsky for a little bit. Who were those mentors for you that, again, pushed you to go further and dream bigger than you ever really thought you were going to be doing when it came to when you first started in the at Penn State?
Yeah, so there's two other people who come to mind. First is Dr. Andy Mcnitt. You probably know him, the sports turf guy at Penn State. He literally changed my life. So my first week or two at Penn State in turf class, I was the only girl in the room, and I'm just like, I don't know, is this really for me? Penn State has a lot of other majors. I don't know. But I think it's the second week of class, he asked me if I'd stay afterward. And he just flat out said, like, look, there's not a lot of women, but you can do this, and we're here for you to make sure that you can. And so he was awesome. He helped me get a part-time job. Like you mentioned, Penn State's got a single A stadium right on campus. So he hooked me up with a part-time job there just to start getting me involved, with everything as soon as he could. And he also put out a call to Nicole Sherry at the Orioles, knowing that she was a female in turf, just wanted to get me in touch with her. And he kind of nudged her and said, look, can you have her, come to the stadium for a couple of days and just get to know you and see how everything was? So him taking that extra step to just get me involved and make sure that I felt comfortable was huge in my decision to stay in turf. And then the second person is Nicole. I met her early in my career. She had me stay at her house for a couple of days, was driving me into the stadium, got to work a game. She put me on a mower to mow the field and chalk the line for a game against the Red Sox. And she and I don't talk super frequently, but I've got her phone number, and, we're here for each other. And I know she's someone I can count on even, 7-8 years later now, however many years it's been.
I mean, you two of the best in the industry, right there. Nicole was, I don't know if you heard about our co-host for the show, Rylan. She was a big advocate for me, passed away a few months ago from brain cancer, but she checked in on him all the time, and she's just one of the best people out there, and Dr. Mcnitt, the goofball himself is what I like to call him. He likes to give me crap, but he really doesn't mean it. And sometimes I'm kind of like,
he gives tough love, but
and I'm like, does he mean it? No, there's no way. And then you hear something, you're like, maybe he does mean it. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to expect anymore, but again, two great people. With everything, obviously you were talking about being a golf course superintendent. Was there any workplace experience for you when it came to internships or anything like that before, again, your second year starting research and focusing in on higher education? And how did that impact sort of how you did things? Again, sort of maybe combating some things you saw maybe when you were working on a course or something like that. Obviously you worked at the minor league stadium, and the guy was great, but there was a lot of po on that field. He again, an amazing guy. He does a great job, but
hey, he doesn't care. The po is green.
That's the consensus in Pennsylvania. Let me tell you, it was the funniest thing I ever. He's like, "Is it green?" And we're like, "It's full of po," and they're like, "We'll take it." I worked at the Steelers, so someone who was picking up sod. It was pretty funny. Sorry.
Oh, man. But yeah, so I worked for Medler Stadium there my first year in the spring semester. And then I did an unofficial internship for the Yankees AAA team, the Scranton Wilkesboro Rail Riders. And then I did an official internship the next summer at the Country Club of Scranton. Even though I said I wanted to go to school to be a golf course superintendent, once I was working at Medler, I just thought, okay, well, now sports turf is going to be the thing. And, Nicole had me up, so I was deep in the sports turf trenches. And then I decided, well, let me just check out golf because I want to make sure I make the right choice. And then it was funny how it worked out after that. I'm really happy in a research capacity now that I have worked in both, even though they were, only shorter 3-4 month internships. Just have a little bit of experience in both. I feel like it's easier for me to connect when I do research that, I have been out there, I have fixed a mound, I have mowed a putting green. So it worked out really well in the end.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when you talk to a lot of people who are, again, educators and researchers to like, I don't know what you're doing right now. I never did that. It's always good and really interesting to hear, again, sort of people who were a part of it and then got into it after, again, a somewhat of a career in sports turf or golf, and both in your case. And it's great to hear. I have a student. He is actually going to be at STMA. He, again, I don't know how he came to this realization, but he wants to be an engineer, but he wants to be an engineer for a company like Toro or John Deere, where he focuses
Wow.
on turf equipment, and he's had 2 summers on golf courses. He wants to double major in turf and engineering, and then focus on, from his experiences, again, doing internships probably through college and maybe doing some time on a golf course or, again, sports field, and see where the sort of the misconnects are, the disconnects. I apologize. I can't talk. Where he can see improvements and then go forward and try and build stuff and innovate new things that, again, would help the turf manager. And I was like, I don't know how you came up with it, but I'm going to help you get there the best I can,
Yeah, that's awesome. And it really speaks to, I mean, people, I think, sometimes have this narrow view that if you're going to school for turf, A, they say things like you're going to school to learn to mow grass, which is wrong. But B, they think you can only work at golf courses. And I mean, this is proof just how, wide of a job perspective you can have if you have a turf degree.
Absolutely. And I've always told my kids, and it's just to be open with them, wherever you want to go in the world, you can go. Do you want to make a lot of money? There's opportunity to find a job at a really top end golf course, head groundskeepers in the MLB, whatnot. You can make it there. You can make a lot of money that you want to make. If you want to go live on a mountain in Switzerland with a golf course nearby and work turf and live there happy with whatever the pay is and whatnot, guess what? There's a course somewhere out there in Switzerland that you can find a place and be happy for the rest of your life, And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I always talk about, you can go anywhere in the world and work in a turf position, when it comes to fertilizer, comes to any sales reps, any companies, whatever it is, there is a turf position, again, nearby, it's, again, something that I always like to point out to kids, because some kids aren't meant for turf, some kids aren't meant to work the long days. And obviously there are kids that are, and they find out on their own sort of where in the turf industry their niche is, so I couldn't agree with you more on that. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, and I babble when I do that. So
I can talk about this stuff all day. I know how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. With everything, again, in your work, being able to, again, interact with people and meet different people around the country, even probably around the world, honestly, what do you think the outlook of our industry is moving forward? I say it too many times, but I feel like right now we're in one of the most critical times in our industry, because, again, with the forefront of natural grass playing surfaces being so important, sports turf, that is something that, again, as an industry, we can capitalize on, bringing in new generations and bringing in awareness, getting people to understand. And I told Dr. Sorokin this. I think if there was an athlete who would notice what we do as an industry in protecting them and player safety, we could have them sort of advocate for the managers, sports turf managers, golfers who, again, the purse is like $8 million, talk about the greenskeeper and how everything works, that would be more, again, visible to everyone, and then put, again, sort of the necessity of who we are as an industry at the forefront of so many people that, again, don't know we exist, when it comes to, again, being ready for a game or being ready for a tournament. And I babbled, but what do you think that outlook is, and how do you see it sort of coming to fruition in the next maybe decade?
Yeah, I think you touched on 2 really interesting points here. And the first is the challenges of the industry. Dr. Brosnan and I have been talking, and we say it's never been more challenging to be a turfgrass manager, right? So you've got, the labor shortage, we've got supply chain issues, we've got pressures from the public on water use and on chemical use. So it's a really challenging time. But it depends on how you look at those challenges, right? So on one hand, it's really disappointing that we have a labor shortage, but on the other hand, that means we've got a lot of demand, right? We have a labor shortage because we have a lot of golf courses and because they're staying open, and we have a lot of new stadiums that are being built, and we need people to take those jobs. So it's a negative, but it's a positive. And it's kind of the same thing with the supply chain thing. Yeah, part of it is that products are being held up because of COVID, but part of it is because we've had such a spike in golf play that, there's more demand. People have a bigger budget now to buy new things. So even though I know it's probably really hard right now, and my heart goes out to whoever is trying to manage turf in these conditions, I think it's positive. I think we're seeing positive growth. And then the other thing you mentioned, is visibility, about trying to get, golfers or athletes or whoever to give us an acknowledgement. And as much as, social media has its downsides, I think we are also getting a new level of exposure, with Twitter and Instagram and social media. I think we're building a little bit more of a case for ourselves. So I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a little bit more acceptance, and I hope a little bit more appreciation for what all the turf managers do.
Yeah, and I agree with you, the appreciation aspect. And I think I brought it up to a few people, but over in England, the Groundsman Association, I think, has done a phenomenal job of putting together sort of spotlights and highlights of their members and making sure people are aware. And again, I think it's interesting because people see it as hollow ground. The soccer pitch and the cricket pitch and all the different things that they're playing on the golf courses, it's like sacred ground, and there's sort of a disconnect when it comes to America and all that. I think there was an article with Nick McKenna on everything that it comes to rushing the field and having all those people running on the field 10 times a season. I'm like, yeah, that's probably not the best thing, but it's interesting, again, to see how things are different, and how, again, things that we could do that would benefit, again, sort of sports turf managers or golf course superintendents in the United States, that I think we should, again, work together. And I'm going to jump completely back, like way back. I'm sorry, to your first, what we were talking about with the research. Something that I really loved about the project with the Women in Turf is the fact that you brought together both sides of the industry, the golf side and the sports turf side. There are very few people that are really looking at it like that. And I feel like with our program and sort of everything that we're trying to develop and help build new high school programs, the golf side and the sports side can really put forth their efforts together, whether in STMA and GCSAA, and really develop these programs to, again, bring in the next generation of those turfgrass managers. What was it for you, again, sort of seeing both sides of the fence and putting them sort of together when it came to what you saw and how you could see maybe something in the future having an impact similar to what I just said, again, having both sides working together?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the need to come together. This is something I've been advocating for years. It's great that GCSAA is kind of leading the charge on this FFA. I guess it's called credit development or whatever. But I think it'd be great if we could get STMA in there too. And even when it comes to things like, lobbying in Congress or, raising awareness, I think a joint effort would be stronger than alone. And when it comes to recruiting, I think I'm a perfect case study, right? So I went to Penn State 110%. I'm being a golf course superintendent. And my first year of school worked on 3 different athletic fields. So I think if as a group, we get people interested in turf, and then, later down the road, they decide which split they take, it ends up helping in the end. There's going to be some people who go to school for sports and move into golf and vice versa. And so what we learned in the research, you talked about earlier how, I blended it and the results are from all 13 women. To me, that speaks volumes, right? So we're analyzing this data and we're looking at it, and these women's journeys and feelings and experiences were so similar in both sectors that their data was able to be analyzed together, right? We didn't have to split it into, well, sports said this and golf said this. And I think sometimes in the industry, we're like, oh, well, there's one of those sports guys and I'm a golf guy, but it's all the same. And there's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of opportunity that I think crosses over both sides of it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And it's really been interesting to see, especially in our sort of situation, again, a high school program, working with the golf course superintendents nearby who readily available have those internships and those job opportunities in the high schoolers can take over the summer to, again, working with STMA and having our kids again present down at the conference and different things like that, and working with both sides and seeing how much passion there is to really, again, bring in that next generation, and really just hope for at some point to see that sort of come together and, again, make it explode, into something that could be truly incredible for the industry. So I loved how you did that with the study. So I truly appreciate that. Something that, again, this is really for our students and they listen back to these and whatnot. With your time at Penn State and Tennessee, what would you say, maybe even not even turf related, but what would be sort of the draws for those schools when it comes to a student who is interested in, again, attending those schools for turf? And why would they be a great opportunity for them?
Yeah, gosh, I could talk about the positive of both schools for an hour. Big picture look, I would say Penn State, the education there. So first of all, they've got a lot of options. They have a 2-year program, a 4-year program, online program. So, especially for people who are in a unique situation, there's a lot of choice. And, Penn State, I think, has the largest turfgrass faculty group. So, they have a professor specifically for turfgrass nutrition, specifically for turfgrass soils. So at Penn State, you're not taking a general soils class that's applicable to turf. You're taking a turfgrass soils class, learning specifically about, infields and putting greens and whatnot. So to me, the education there and the opportunities were just top notch. Tennessee also has.
So jealous by that, by the way, when they introduced all that. I was like,
yeah.
What? Like, I wanted this when I was at Tech, but there was no way that was possible. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good. The turf curriculum there, I was impressed when I went up to, tour it, and they gave me a list of what I was going to be taking, and I was shocked, but, in a good way. And Tennessee also has a really strong educational program. They send their students to really good internships. The thing I see as kind of, the big selling point for Tennessee is their innovation. It's a little bit of a smaller faculty group, but they're on the younger side, and they're a very tight-knit crew. And they're just open-mindedness is amazing. You might have seen some tweets and stuff about Tennessee Turf Tuesday. When the pandemic hit, our group did not dwell on, oh, this is terrible, we can't do field day. Oh, this is terrible, we can't do this. They were on it and developed new ways to connect with people. And can't talk about it too much yet, but they have a really exciting experiential learning opportunity in the works for some of our future students. So definitely, a program to look out for in terms of, them meeting needs in new ways, I think.
And that's awesome. And I'm not going to pry about the cool, interesting thing that we would love to know about, but
yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm just kidding. We really wrap up the podcast on these last two, because again, it's really cool to hear different, again, thoughts on it and everything. When you first started in the industry, heading to Penn State and sort of through your career, what would be one thing that you wish you knew when you started? It doesn't particularly have to be make things easier, better, or whatever, just something that you would have liked to know. And why would you pick that thing?
I probably wish I would have known just how connected and accepting the industry can be. I think, with Twitter and stuff, the younger generation right now has a huge opportunity. Like, everyone in the turf industry loves it and they want to see more people. So if you want an internship, DM that guy on Twitter and say, hey, do you have one? Or if you have a question with your homework or something you see in the field, you can tweet it and people will help you. And maybe because I was a female and just young, I just don't feel like I took advantage of the help that others are willing to offer. So I just think, if you have a question or you want something, just go after it and say it. And I guarantee the industry will find a way to meet that need.
I should have tweeted my homework. Jeez.
Well,
I didn't know that, that's why I was struggling all those years. Freaking Twitter. And the last thing that we really like to get into is the best words of advice you could give, again, a student who's considering looking at the possibility of, again, pursuing a career in the industry. Again, having that connection with all those people is great. And definitely a big draw to what we do as turfgrass managers. But what would be your best words of advice when approaching, again, the opportunity?
a little bit cliche, but I would say follow your gut. You know, I've had a couple gut instincts and they've always proven right. So if you think turf is for you, especially for the ladies out there, you know, just get after it and do it. Don't worry about what someone else might say. You know, if you feel like that's what you want to do, then do it. And on the flip side of that, at least in my opinion, you know, walking away from an unhealthy situation is not quitting. So, you know, if you end up in a situation that's not what you want, walk away from it and find out what you do want, because especially in the turf industry, there's just opportunities abound. So we'll find the right thing for you.
Are you going to be at any future events? Are you going down to STMA or GIS?
Unfortunately, not this year. My defense is coming up here in a couple weeks like you. Ooh. So I've put a little bit of a hiatus on travel, but
unfortunately, that's something that sounds pretty good right about now for that. Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time, and I hope your defense goes great because, again, I understand. Unfortunately, I understand what you're going through. Not as intense. I'm going to be honest with you. With the degree I'm getting, it's definitely not as intense or intensive as, again, what you've been working on. I do want to say thank you for everything you've done and for taking the time to talk today. Again, our kids are going to love it, and we really can't say thank you enough for everything.
Well, and I appreciate you having me. It's so important, I think, to share this paper and share this information on recruiting. And I'm so happy to do it whenever someone gives me the chance.
Absolutely. Again, thanks.